talked about his contributions.
Yes.
You've talked about some of the books that he wrote. You've talked about some of the analysis that he made, not only as regards the struggle that was going on in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, but also in the world at large against NATO, against imperialism. So what are some of these ideas that you think stand out and that you think are relevant in guiding our struggle today?
Well, I think I mentioned the first one. We have to have revolutionary ideology. Without revolutionary ideology, then you can't win. He also was very clear on the question of scientific socialism and struggling for the question of Pan-Africanism and struggling to understand your own conditions. He was clear that he was not just trying to transfer ideologies from another place and strategies and tactics from another place. He was clear that it's only by understanding your relationship to others, but also understanding your particular conditions in this place that you're struggling. He was saying where some of his fighters, some of his people were sent to other places to train in guerrilla warfare. And then they come back. And some of the training that they were receiving wasn't useful in Guinea-Bissau because the terrain was different in Guinea-Bissau. There were no trains in Guinea-Bissau. You know, you're learning how to blow up a train when there's no train. Or you're learning how to do warfare from the hills and there's no hills. So you have to know your conditions. And he taught us, and he said one of the clear things about economics and furthering on the understanding that people like Marx and Mao had written on economics. He said that class struggle was not the only aspect of history. In other words, you know, when we read Marx, he emphasizes that class struggle is how we understand history, not just by individuals, which is a very important point. You know, we have to understand the classes that are in tension. So we have to know that in a class society, like a feudal society, that is a struggle between the landlords, the lords, the kings, and the serfs. We have to understand that in the economic system of slavery, there's the struggle between the slave masters and the slaves or the enslaved. We have to understand that these things to understand the nature of the struggle, which is much more important than us understanding just individuals in the struggle. So history is not really the history of one great person, but is the history of this class struggle. But what Cabral did is to clarify this even further. He said, if indeed it was only a class struggle, then we would be saying that there's no history in humanity, in society, in Africa before classes become prevalent. So he went on to explain to people the struggle is around the questions of the means of production and who controls those means of production. So it's the productive forces that are defining history. The productive forces, which they do come to a point of class struggle. And he went on to say that if you don't understand that, then you can never have communism, because we said that communism is going to be a classless society. And we know that communalism was a classless society. But there was history during communalism, and there'll be history during communism. History will not disappear. So he clarified that point and furthered the people's understanding of these revolutionary ideas.
You've talked about his understanding that there can be no successful revolution without revolutionary ideas. And of course, we see that he was part of an organization that was guided by revolutionary ideology. Having said that and having understood that, what would you say is his argument for organization? Why do you think it's important, according to what we've seen about him and what he was saying, why do you think it's important for people to be organized and for people to belong to organizations if they want to achieve any meaningful change in the society?
Yeah, I think from his experience, one, it came to be very clear on the need for organization and the need for how you can move in a revolutionary fashion. Because he understood that the forces that he was dealing with were organized. We talked about the layers of their organization. We were saying on the level of the Portuguese, on the level of NATO, on the level of imperialism as a world force, socially and economically. There's no way an unorganized force, he saw, could defeat these forces. I mean, the organization had to move through stages. I mean, at first, they attempted a peaceful transition in the society, but they were mowed down, shot and killed. At some point, they had to come to build some kind of organizational methodology that could take on the enemy. And they had to be organized. It could not be disorganized. I mean, if it was this, if you try to take on a military force that's organized without organization, especially, that's the only thing that you can do. You can out-organize them. You cannot beat them straight on when they have all the military hardware. He also understood the people, the masses, were also being affected by the state of war. So they had to provide and work with organizing the masses, organizing when a liberated space, organizing healthcare, continued education, the things that people had to have for everyday life. You cannot do that if you're not an organized force. So it's critical that we understand, again, like a revolution cannot be successful without a revolutionary ideology, it can't not be successful without an organized force, an organization. In fact, he emphasized that our goal is not just to build another organization, but a party, a political party. He understands that in a political party, you can develop monolithic thought, meaning a set of ideas that keep you all together and take you to the next stage of your struggle. Because when he defined liberation, he was clear, the party was clear, that you can't be liberated until you liberated your means of production, your resources, the things that you build your economy around. Because that's one of the errors of many of the national liberation forces on the continent. And it's also where we have not reached full liberation on the continent. I mean, it's because we have not liberated our land and resources. So we're selling raw resources. We're allowing our land to be occupied in many of the settler places in Africa. So we don't have the resources to continue production. And this is what colonization and imperialism does when it gets to a place. It destroys your ability to clothe yourself, to raise your food, all the things that every society does before imperialism comes here. They make us think that we were somehow dependent. When the Europeans came to Africa, Africa didn't need anything that the Europeans were offering. They didn't need jewelry. They didn't need things from outside. Africa was already producing its own iron, turning iron ore into iron, taking gold out of the ground and utilizing it, growing cotton and making clothes, all the things that make a society. And he was clear that until you get back to that productive ways, you will constantly be dependent on an oppressor. And this is what he was clear on, and this is what he understood organization had to be. You had to be organized to take your every step to every level, or you'll be continually oppressed. So he was clear that you cannot win this fight without organization. Maybe I've over-talked on that one, but yes.
Yes. It's an overemphasis on what's important. Of course, we know that definitely you have to be organized, you have to belong to an organization in order to defeat the enemy, because that's what the enemy is. The enemy is organized, and therefore we must out-organize them.